The landslide in Sicily is the deadliest landslide in Italian history, and it has swallowed 350 million cubic meters of earth, making it 1.5 times larger than the 1963 Vajont disaster. More than 2,000 residents have been permanently displaced. A criminal investigation has been launched, and yesterday, the Italian Prime Minister flew back to Niscemi for the second time in 3 weeks to announce 150 million euros in emergency funding, because entire neighborhoods of this town will never exist again. But here is the detail that tells the real story. A stone cross, carved into rock and mounted on a marble pedestal, had stood for nearly 3 decades in the Sante Croce district. It was erected in memory of a church destroyed by the last major landslide in 1997. For weeks after January 25th, that cross sat meters from the new abyss, photographed by every news crew that visited, and shared across Italian media as a symbol of hope and resistance. On February 9th, the ground beneath it gave way. The cross fell into the void. It took a police robot to retrieve it from the ravine 6 days later, broken into pieces. To understand how Niscemi arrived here, you have to watch the timeline accelerate. On January 16th, the first landslide ripped apart Provincial Road 12. 35 families were evacuated. 2 days later, Cyclone Harry made landfall. Between January 18th and January 21st, the storm dumped what amounted to an entire year's rainfall onto southern Sicily in 72 hours. On January 25th, at 1 p.m. on a quiet Sunday afternoon, the second landslide tore open a 4-kilometer gash along the western and southern edge of the town. 500 people fled with whatever they could carry. By January 26th, Italy's Council of Ministers declared a state of emergency and allocated 100 million euros across 3 devastated regions. But that was only the beginning. On January 28th, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni arrived by helicopter. Civil Protection Chief Fabio Siciliano stood in front of reporters in Niscemi and delivered a verdict that no one wanted to hear. Houses on the edge of the landslide can never be occupied again, he said. Residents from those areas would be permanently relocated. The next day, Siciliano appeared on Sky TG24 and put a number to the catastrophe that stunned even the experts. He said the town moved approximately 350 million cubic meters of material. For comparison, the 1963 Vajont disaster moved 263 million cubic meters. Technically, it was almost 1.5 times the volume of Vajont. Vajont killed 1,910 people. Then came the part that changed everything about how Italy would respond to this crisis. On January 31st, a 3-story building in the Sante Croce neighborhood collapsed on the ridge, just meters from where a car had been photographed, dangling over the precipice in an image that circled the globe. The landslide was not slowing down. It was eating the town from underneath. Niscemi sits in the province of Caltanissetta, south-central Sicily, roughly 25 kilometers inland from the coastal city of Gela. The town of 25,000 people was built on a plateau at an elevation of 330 meters, overlooking the fertile plain of Gela and the Mediterranean beyond. That plateau is the problem. It rests on layers of clay and sand, sedimentary deposits that hold their shape when dry, but transform into a thick, structureless paste when saturated. Below the town, the terrain descends in a series of slopes carved by centuries of erosion toward the Meroglio River Valley. Gravity has been pulling Niscemi toward that valley for generations. Provincial roads 10 and 12, the 2 main arteries connecting Niscemi to the state road network, are both destroyed. That leaves Provincial Road 11 as the only route in or out. 25,000 people, 1 road. Here is what no one saw coming, and what makes this disaster fundamentally different from any single weather event. Niscemi was classified as R4, the highest geological risk level in Italy. That classification existed before Cyclone Harry. It existed before the 2026 landslide. It existed for years. Giovanna Papalardo, professor of applied geology at the University of Catania, warned that the situation is repeating itself from 1997 with even more significant characteristics. The landslide front now extends roughly 4 kilometers and directly affects houses facing the slope. But that is only half the problem. After the 1997 landslide, prosecutors investigated. Every defendant was acquitted. The stabilization work promised to the community was divided into phases. Phases 2 and 3 of that 1997 response received their funding in December 2025. 28 years later, Mayor Massimiliano Conti revealed that on every anniversary of the 1997 disaster, he sent letters to the President of the Republic, the Prime Minister, the President of the region, and department heads. And here is the fact that seals it. Of the 46 hydrogeological projects funded through Italy's National Recovery Plan across Sicily, not a single one concerns Niscemi. In 9 years, no municipal administration submitted projects to the commissioner structure for the town. Climate-supercharged rainfall collided with terrain that was geologically doomed and politically abandoned. The ground had no chance. The numbers tell the rest. 350 million cubic meters have been displaced. Over 2,000 residents were evacuated as of this week, quadruple the original 500. The landslide front now stretches beyond 5 kilometers. The risk zone has expanded to 25 square kilometers, and an absolute building ban has been imposed by the Basin Authority of Sicily. Damage across the island from Cyclone Harry is estimated at €2 billion. Hundreds of buildings have been declared unsafe. Orange groves, olive groves, farms, and gardens that had fed families for generations now lie buried under debris. In the Sante Croce district, Francesca Eparo was in bed with a fever when the landslide struck on January 25th. She had survived this before. In 1997, her father's house was destroyed by the previous landslide. The family rebuilt their lives in the historic center near the Belvedere overlooking the plain. 28 years later, her home now stands near another landslide zone. It faces possible demolition. For the second time in her life, the earth is taking everything she built. And this is where it gets worse. Salvatore Vella, the chief prosecutor of Gela, has opened a criminal investigation into negligent disaster and damage. On February 12th, 3 professors from the University of Palermo, specialists in applied geology, structural geology, and geomorphology, conducted the first formal judicial inspection of the landslide front, accompanied by magistrates and police. Vella told reporters his office is examining a substantial body of material, including images from the Italian Space Agency. Witness hearings will follow. One thing is certain, he said, no one will be spared scrutiny. The investigation will determine whether countermeasures could have prevented this catastrophe after 1997, or whether construction and planning decisions actively worsened the instability. Yesterday, February 16th, Prime Minister Meloni returned to Niscemi for a second visit. She toured the landslide wearing a civil protection helmet, met with displaced citizens, and announced €150 million specifically for the town. The money will fund demolitions of uninhabitable buildings, safety measures, and the purchase of new properties. On Wednesday, a government decree will formalize the allocation and appoint Siciliano as Extraordinary Commissioner for the Reconstruction. Meloni called Niscemi the most closely monitored municipality in Europe, but she also told residents she cannot provide a timeline. The decisions about the buffer zone, about which homes survive and which are demolished, depend on technical data, not politics. And the technical data is still being gathered because the ground beneath Niscemi has not finished speaking. Salvatore Cosina, Director General of Sicily's Civil Protection Authority, confirmed during a site inspection that the phenomenon is complex and that investigations involve INGV, the Experimental Geophysical Observatory, and universities from Catania, Enna, and Rome. The Italian Space Agency may be brought in. The University of Florence is analyzing satellite data to measure ground movement over time. The red zone boundaries could still shift. Further rainfall could reactivate the slide. How do you rebuild a town on ground that is still moving? How do you tell 2,000 people that the homes their grandparents built, the streets where they grew up, and the view of the Mediterranean they saw from their kitchen windows will be demolished by government decree? And if a town classified at the highest possible geological risk for years received none of the 46 funded stabilization projects in the entire region, how many other towns across Italy are waiting for the same ground to give way beneath them? In Niscemi, they recovered the stone cross from the bottom of the ravine. They brought it back to the mayor in pieces. The symbol survived. The ground it stood on did not.